Hope everyone had a good summer break and is ready to begin the new school year. I want to personally thank each and every one of you for the job that you do. I appreciate the effort you make to educate our students in whatever role you play. Each of you is important to the overall success of our system. As individuals, we face challenges personally and professionally, but with God's help, we will overcome. As a school system, we will face challenges this year as well, but we will work diligently to overcome those as well as we did last year. Our goal is to provide the best education possible for our students, and together we can make that happen. Stay positive and let's have a great year. I'm going to open this up in a word of prayer and ask for blessings on our system this year, then I'll turn it over to the agenda. Let us pray. Dear God, we come to you today to thank you for everything that you do for us. We just pray that your hand of safety and love and compassion will be on our school system, all of our stakeholders, our employees, our students, our community, that you would lead and guide us in the direction that we should go so that we can provide the best education possible for our students in Chilton County. Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. We are excited to get started. I'm Michelle Coppage. I'm the Special Education Director, and I know most of you have heard this before. This is not your first rodeo, but each year there are just a few things we have to go back over to make sure that our lunchroom staffs, teachers, janitors, bus drivers, everyone is aware of how we can help the students in our county. One of the first things I need to mention is the importance of confidentiality. That is not just unique to special education, that is for every student. So please be mindful of discussing information. Certainly that's never okay, but especially in a small town, you never know if you're talking to someone's aunt, uncle, cousin, brother. You just never know. And those things can be very hurtful. So please make sure you're keeping everything identifiable, particularly for students who have disabilities regarding their disability. That should be something that should be kept private. Parents always have access to those records. Sometimes there will be some questions about the content of records, but just know that they have a right to see what belongs to their student and their student only. And if you have questions, please let us know. But that's just a good thing to be mindful of. Again, not just with special education records, but with all records. The big thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is the special education process. Now more than ever, we have students who are struggling, and it is our job as educators to figure out what those struggles are stemming from. It's really difficult coming off of a pandemic when we've had some students who have not been in schools for 18 months to determine, is it lack of instructional time that's impacting them, or is there a disability there? We will work together on that process. Certainly parents can reach out if they have concerns. That is a process, that is their right. However, as a school system, we don't want to circumvent the processes that are in place to help those students. So if you have a student who is struggling, the PST team, the response to intervention process, those are the things we want to go through. We want to gather data, we want to take some documentation, and we want to go through all of those steps before we begin looking at a child to see if they do or do not have a disability and how we may need to help them. Every child that there is a concern about has a right to a referral meeting. That is child fine, that is something we publicize, that is something that anybody can reach out on. Like, hey, I have concerns about a child, and that is my job to make sure that we're following up on those. Once we have that referral meeting, the people that are involved in that situation may or may not see that we need additional information, but that information will be considered at that time. The power that you have as part of that team, especially if you're a general education teacher, is to be a part of that team and bring information, bring documentation, bring data, bring things that we can look at. It's not always super helpful to bring a whole lot of I thinks or I feel likes, but if we can see some black and white numbers or some strategies that have been implemented and not successful, that always helps us make good decisions for students. When you're looking at implementing whatever their plan is, that's also not something that one individual can say, I don't really think that's a great idea for that plan anymore. So again, the power of being a member of a team for these students is so that we can come together, we can talk, we can share our concerns, what we see as needs, what we see as difficulties, and make the best plan for that student so that ultimately we see success all the way around, emotionally, socially, functionally, academically. There's a whole lot more than just how they're doing in the classroom. So if you have questions about that process, you can certainly reach out to me through email or phone. That is what I'm here for. Additionally, in thinking about your students who do have IEPs or who do receive special education services, just be mindful of what their day needs to look like. They are entitled to the same amount of school day that everybody else is. So, although it may be tempting to say you can come in later, you can leave earlier, that should not be done as a whole across the board. That is something that should be considered by each IEP team, and certainly can be, but just know that you need to maintain the integrity of their educational day just like for every other student. Aside from that, we are here as a special education team to help you. I have great central office staff, and so 504, you can also contact us for 504. We can be contacted for gifted concerns, anything that falls in the special education realm. I hope you all have a great year, and if there's something that we can do to assist you, please don't hesitate to let us know. Thank you.
Hey there, folks. I wish y'all could see this camera setup. I can tell you I would definitely not be great at being any kind of politician that had to do this regularly. I don't love it. But a lot of y'all don't know me yet, but I am Katie Galloway, and I work at United Way of Central Alabama, which now includes Chilton County. And the main thing is that while there's a little bit of a name change, not much else has changed for Chilton County. The agencies that Chilton County United Way was supporting are still being supported by United Way of Central Alabama. And so know that I know that y'all have been a part of payroll deductions, and lots of you have given, and so thank you for what you've done in the past, and know that if you continue to give this year, which first of all I would really appreciate, but also that money's going to stay in Chilton County and still be here to help all those same agencies in this community, just like it always has. And so I guess the addition is some of the United Way agencies that have also been being supported by our United Way already. A lot of them do work here in Chilton County as well, and so we're growing the footprint, and that's the main thing. Y'all will be getting brochures to see some of the new, I guess some of our statistics from last year and some of the things we've been doing. But also, I talked to a couple of our agencies to see how, I guess, Chilton County had already been being helped. And my favorite was that now I get to talk about Ronald McDonald House as not just a theory of, if you had kids at Children's and you couldn't stay close by, wouldn't you want somewhere to stay? Because most of the places that I usually get to talk to are close enough to be close by to Children's. But I actually talked to the head of Ronald McDonald House, and she said that I think in the past 10 years, nearly 60 families have been helped by Ronald McDonald House and have been able to stay there close to the hospital while their kids were in treatment. And so I'm sure somebody knows somebody who had kids up there, and any of us have probably made a trip to at least the emergency room, if not Children's. I know my kids have brought me there on several occasions. Most recently, I think a broken arm. I think we missed stitches on the last head injury, but that's what happens when you have an 8 and a 5-year-old boy. There's regularly amount of blood. But basically, what it comes down to is just because the name has changed doesn't mean a lot has changed for United Way here in Chilton County. And so we appreciate everything that you've done. I personally appreciate everything that you've done in the past to support the United Way here, and hope that you'll continue to do so. And thanks so much, and I hope you'll have a great school year.
Good afternoon. And I got to meet Katie recently and some of her other staff, and we are extremely grateful to be one of those agencies supported by the United Ways of Central Alabama, and actually just received a grant where we were able to hire an additional therapist, so we're extremely grateful for that. So, like I said, my name is Jana Zelski, and I serve as the director of Butterfly Bridge, which is the Child Advocacy Center that serves Chilton County. And my staff and I just wanted to give you a big shout out, first of all, because we know well, we don't know how you did it last year. We'll just put it that way. You were awesome in such a hard year, actually the last year and a half, and we just thank you. You were truly heroes, and we don't know how you did it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And also I'd like to preface what I'm about to say with saying that probably many of you could be up here teaching what we're about to teach because you have heard it so many times. But we hope that you look at this as kind of a refresher course if you have been in education a while, and also some of you who are new, you will learn something new today. And so I have a few of our multidisciplinary team members here with us today that will be presenting on different topics when it comes to child abuse and neglect. So I'm going to first start out by talking about Aaron's Law. Some of you are very familiar with it if you have been a part of the education system for a while. But basically, Aaron's Law was passed in Alabama in 2015, and we were, I think, the 26th state in the United States to pass Aaron's Law. And what Aaron's Law did was it required that all public schools in each state implement a prevention-oriented child sexual abuse program that teaches, first of all, students pre-K to 12th age-appropriate techniques to recognize child sexual abuse and to tell a trusted adult if it happens. It also mentions school personnel and teaching all school personnel about child sexual abuse and other types of abuse, as well as parents and guardians, just equipping them with signs, warning signs of child abuse, how they can receive assistance and referrals and resources if it comes to the fact that they might need that. Many of you who have been around a little bit too probably remember that when Aaron's Law was passed in 2015, we worked very closely with the board on the curriculums for the students. And so we were very fortunate through Walmart and Alabama Power to receive some grants to support the Think First Stay Safe curriculum, which is done with the kindergarten through 6th, as well as the Scan and the Play It Safe curriculums that is done with the 7th and the 12th graders. So I know many of you out there have taught that in the past, and it's going to be more important than ever this year, in my opinion at least. So as the law relates to school personnel, in component 10 of Aaron's Law, it does say that a professional training component for administrators, teachers, and other school personnel on talking to students about child sexual abuse prevention, effects of sexual abuse on children, handling of child abuse disclosures, and mandatory reporting. And Marilyn's going to mention in a minute the training through DHR that most of you probably are aware of and have done and will be renewing. But what we're doing today is kind of that extra component to that. What we know as far as statistics go, and if you've been in education in a while, this probably is not shocking to you at all, but 1 in 7 girls and 1 in 25 boys will be sexually abused before they turn 18 years old. So if you put that all together, that's 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before they're 18 years old. And people that don't work with kids every day in these situations, or maybe aren't educators like you, that's shocking to them. And so I think just educating people about that in general is extremely important. The mission of the Chilton County Child Abuse Multidisciplinary Team is to cooperate in a collaborative approach to cases involving child victims in order to facilitate strong case development and to reduce the amount of further trauma on the child victim. And when I say Child Abuse Multidisciplinary Team, that involves a lot of people in our county. So just so you know, as someone who works for the Board of Education, once a case is reported to the local DHR or law enforcement agency, there's a big team of people that will start working together for that child. And that multidisciplinary team includes law enforcement, Department of Human Resources, District Attorney's Office, mental health providers, medical providers, and the Child Advocacy Center. And so, like I said before, we're all working together to try to lessen the trauma by working together in a collaborative nature. And then in turn, that means a stronger case if the case does go through the criminal justice system. Quickly, what we do at the Child Advocacy Center, in case you're not extremely familiar with us, but we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And so we, if I were to put our services into 5 buckets, we seek justice, we restore, advocate, collaborate, and educate. The first reason a child is going to come to us is for an initial forensic interview once a report of abuse has been made to the Department of Human Resources or a law enforcement agency. So that's how a child's first going to get to us. We do the non-leading, non-suggestive forensic interview, fact-finding for investigators so that the child talks to one person in a neutral, child-friendly space, and it's all recorded, and it's done by people who are trained to gather that information in a way that's what we know is the best way to do it for the child and for the adolescent. We also do trauma-focused therapy services for the children. We also help a child and a family all the way through the criminal justice process, and so we could be involved with families several years, which you'll hear from CJ Robinson in a little bit about the court process. So we are with them from the beginning of the investigation all the way through the prosecution of the case and the treatment part, which we're helping with. And then the collaborate piece is where we are constantly working with those other team of professionals that I've already mentioned to make sure that no child's falling through the cracks and we're doing everything that we can for the child and for the family. And then there's the educate piece, which is basically like what I'm doing today. We will come to any community group and we will talk about any child abuse related topic, because we know the more power, the more education people have on it, the more power they have to hopefully keep it from happening, and it will make their child less vulnerable. So we do a lot of teaching to adults, because it's really the adult's responsibility to have that knowledge in order to hopefully protect children better. So why should we learn about this? So what we know is that more than 90% of the time, the child is abused by someone they know, that they love, and that they trust. So what we know is that perpetrators will often threaten children and manipulate them to keep them from telling anyone about what's happened. They'll say things like, nobody will believe you. They'll threaten them with consequences if they do share the secret that they have. Also, many times younger children especially, they don't realize that what's happening is wrong. So young children may have never been exposed to teaching, telling them that sexual abuse behaviors between adults and children are wrong. And you may even have abusers who are normalizing it for them and saying that's what everybody does with children. And so there's also that. So I'm going to go quickly through the different types of abuse that you need to be aware of. So first of all, child sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse is any forced or tricked sexual contact by an adult or older child with a child. Usually the adult or older child is in a position of power or authority over the child. Physical force is generally not used, since there's usually a trusting relationship, as I mentioned before, between the adult or older child and the child who is being abused. So child sexual abuse is forcing, coercing, or persuading a child to engage in any sexual act, including non-contact acts like exhibitionism, exposure to pornography, voyeurism, and communicating in a sexual manner. And it is a crime punishable by law. All right, physical abuse. Physical injury that results in substantial harm to the child or genuine threat of substantial harm from physical injury to the child, including an injury that is at variance with the history of an explanation given. All right, then there's neglect. Failure to provide needed food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision such that the child's health, safety, and well-being are threatened with harm. Emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is inflicting mental or emotional injury to a child and or causing or permitting the child to be in a situation in which the child sustains a mental or emotional injury that results in an observable and material impairment in the child's growth, development, or psychological functioning. And I will say, and I think that my multidisciplinary team partners will agree, that many times when you see neglect or emotional abuse, that's the tip of the iceberg. We find that sometimes that is the presenting problem, but once you start talking to kids, they are going to talk about all other types of abuse as well. And so we may get a neglect call, DHR may get that, and then it turns into where they find that there's physical abuse as well. So just keep that in mind when you are working with children, that you may only be hearing the tip of the iceberg. And so just always remember that. Moving on to sexually reactive behaviors. So what does that mean? What that means is children are acting out in sexual ways. Many times that's with other children because they themselves have either been sexually abused in the past or they may have been exposed to things of a sexual nature. That could be in their home, that could be, they could have been exposed to pornography. It can be a number of different things, and it is a learned behavior. So when we're talking about sexually reactive behaviors, child on child, there's no really rigid profile of a sexually reactive child, but there are some characteristics that are found most often in these children. And some of those are things like there is a history of sexual abuse with that child. The child is acting out with children younger than themselves. They have a knowledge of sex that is beyond their age level. They may simulate copulation with dolls, toys, other children, and even animals and adults. Many of these children appear to have little or no age-appropriate fear of strangers. They have no sense of boundaries, modesty, or privacy where their personal physical space is concerned. Also, some of these children may act flirtatious or promiscuous in ways that are not age-appropriate. They may use coercion, bribery, or force in what would appear to be otherwise normal sex play with same-age friends. The sexual contact with other children maybe appears to be more adult in nature than age appropriate. Some of these kids might demand secrecy and make threats of harm if the acts are disclosed. Some of these children may lie or manipulate when confronted with knowledge of the sexual contact. Some of these children may use objects, violence, or weapons during the sex act. And these children at times will touch children and adults inappropriately, actually in public. And excessive masturbation and exposure is also part of the things that we might see in these children. So, should you report children who are sexually acting out with other children? And I think Marilyn would agree with me. Yes, you should. And why is that? Because without intervention, these kids, without direction and without some needed education and therapy, these kids, if there's never an intervention, may grow up to be juvenile and adult sex offenders, and I don't think any of us want that. So if it's not reported as well, more children may be exposed to these types of behaviors because they haven't learned that that's not appropriate, and they haven't had any treatment for that. So just keep that in mind. That is actually a report to the Department of Human Resources. In the interest of time today, I'm going to just kind of tell you where to go to look this up, and this isn't the only place, but there are lists of signs to kind of help you recognize all the different types of abuse that I've talked about today. And there's behavioral signs and physical signs associated with each of these types of abuse. And so one place you can go is to the Butterfly Bridge website at butterflybridgecac.org, and we have across the menu, the top, it says resources. You can find abuse indicators there, or basically you can get in any search engine and put indicators of child abuse, and you will find lists. I do encourage you to familiarize yourself with those things that can be indicators of abuse. We know that some children are at higher risk for victimization, and some of those children are children who are disabled, chronically ill, or perceived as different. Also, children who come from homes where there's lots of family dysfunction and family members experiencing a life crisis, substance abuse by family members, maybe the parent has a physical or mental health problem, a young or single parent, domestic violence, and poor communication. All of those things put kids at higher risk for victimization. So I've already mentioned that most of the time the perpetrator is someone that the child loves and trusts and knows very well, and many times it's the family member. So let's talk now about why kids don't tell. There's a lot of reasons, but just to start out, why a kid may not run and tell the second sexual abuse, especially if sexual abuse happens, is they just have a fear because maybe they have been threatened or manipulated by the perpetrator. Like I said, they love or they know the person abusing them, and they don't want that loved one to get into trouble. They want their acceptance and approval, even though something bad might be happening to them. There's a lot of feelings that kids have when this happens, like shame, embarrassment, guilt, just a general lack of understanding about what's actually happening, confusion. Many times kids will blame themselves. They think that they did something to cause it, or many times the abuser may tell them that it's their fault. And you think about kiddos too. They've been taught to respect adults, whether they may not be taught that at home, but they've been probably taught that at school, probably taught that in sports activities or camps or churches, but they've been taught to respect adults. And so think about how hard that would be for a young child to speak up about an adult doing something to them that they shouldn't be doing. Some more reasons why they don't tell: they don't want to upset their loved ones. Like I said, many times it's someone within their family that's doing it. They also don't speak up many times because they want to protect that loved one or maybe their favorite pet from harm. After doing this many, many years, I've had children tell me in forensic interviews that the abuser actually told them, if you tell, I'll hurt your mom. If you tell, I'll kill your dog. And so those sorts of things, it stays in their minds. It really impacts them. They don't think anyone will believe them at times, and that's what they're being told many times by the abuser. They fear what a loved one might do to the abuser if they were to find out that they're being abused. So also many kids will feel it's a private matter that should not be talked about, and maybe that's kind of the climate of their family and their household, that we just keep it within the family. Many kids may think it's kind of normal, and it happens to all kids. Like I said earlier, that's mainly the younger children that may think that. Some kids know it's abnormal, and they feel very alone, and they think it's so unusual that they're just embarrassed to go forward with the information. Although you heard the stats earlier, it's not quite as abnormal as most people would think. And then there are those kids who maybe told someone once and they were not believed and were not protected. And so those are the kids too that many times speaking up again, it's extremely difficult for them to do. All right, so just in talking for a minute about the COVID-19 pandemic and child abuse. So home is not a dangerous place for most children, but in cases where it is a dangerous place because of physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, domestic violence, drug use, school is the connect point for those kids to start getting help and services. So students not being in school creates barriers to reporting abuse, as I know you were all aware of. I had several teacher friends contact me last year, so extremely worried about the kids, especially when everyone was at home. And so I know it was all on the forefront of your mind. What we know too is that in times of crisis and economic instability like we've had during the pandemic, child abuse and neglect rates increase. However, reports of child abuse and neglect in Alabama last year declined dramatically between March and June. And I think that's pretty obvious. It was happening, it just wasn't getting reported. Why? Because they weren't in school. Y'all are the connect points. So the ability to speak up for kids' safety is crucial at this time, as it always is, but I think even more so this year. So as kids return to the classroom, you may be the only one that they learn to trust to tell about their abuse. It's imperative you're prepared to handle it. All right. And I understand that there is going to be a virtual learning option for 9th through 12th. Is that correct? Okay, so this is, I know it's not going to be like last year where everyone has the virtual learning option, but if, with the virtual learning, just continuing to let students know you remain a supportive adult in their life, checking in regularly, providing encouragement, asking engaging questions. For instance, give me one word to describe how you feel today. How is learning from home different from learning at school? Some signs that something may be wrong in virtual learning, lack of attendance in the virtual classroom, homework assignments not being turned in, if a child communicates they feel unsafe, you see a child in a dangerous environment, you notice a significant change in the child's mood or behavior. And I think I went over this example report last year when it comes to virtual learning, because I know this is extremely difficult when you don't have your eyes on them in the classroom every day. But an example report when it comes to a child you may be concerned about and that's doing the virtual learning option, here's an example. A child maybe is not engaged in the virtual classroom in 10 days, but they have internet access. You've made 5 attempts to contact the parent or the caregiver due to the concern that the child's not participating and is negatively impacting their education. You are aware that the child experienced maybe physical abuse a year ago. To me, that would be enough of a concern and a suspicion that you might want to report something if you're not getting anywhere with the attempts and the child is not being engaged. So speaking again a little bit about the reports of abuse plunging during the early weeks of the pandemic. So there's been some research done with both local child welfare agencies and national emergency room visits, and what that research suggests is that while total child abuse reports declined significantly nationwide last year, the cases that we're seeing that really did rise were likely to result from medical exams and hospitalizations. Like they were getting severe physical abuse cases at emergency rooms across the nation, and so those are the types of cases that they were aware of. With more kids set to return to the traditional classroom this year, the research findings raise the question of whether school systems across our nation will be prepared to assist such a large number of children who maybe have suffered what we call invisible trauma. Some of the traumas that we've talked about here today. You can't tell a child has been sexually abused, so that's an example of invisible trauma. And the decline in reports, of course, appears to be related to school closures, because we know so many of you are the ones that when you do have concerns or a child comes to you with information, you are the ones that make that report. And so definitely that decline was related to the school closures. All right. So, this fall, or next week, whatever you want to call it, it's amazing. Kids were coming in last week and saying, this week, saying I start school next week, so we're having to make appointment times different, and we're like, wow, it's already that time again. But school systems really need to be ready to identify and provide services to a sizable group of students. I hate to say that, Mr. Griffin, but most likely this school year is going to be more so than ever because of the last school year. Many kids, I know not all kids were doing virtual learning last year, but so many were, and they were isolated from their teachers and their friends, but also they were under a threat from adults in their home. So more kids are going to be back in school after a very long period of basically being at home doing their virtual learning. And so this year, like I said to begin with, child abuse prevention is going to be more important than ever during this school year. Pay really special attention to those kids in your classroom that you know have a history of abuse or neglect, a history of mental health concerns, who have parents with substance abuse issues, children who have discussed or attempted suicide in the past, children and adolescents who are caring for younger siblings, and children whose families have very limited support systems. So they're definitely going to be the most vulnerable anyway, but very much so even during this time where we're coming out of a pandemic. Okay, so you've been in school about a month, and your things are going great, everything's going along, and you've made really great relationships with your students, and they're really starting to love you and trust you. Believe me, I hear about you in forensic interviews with kids all the time. They talk highly of their teachers. So you're the one that they decide that they're going to disclose information to, maybe stuff that's been happening over the summer, or maybe last year they were in virtual learning, and they're talking about all the things that's happened. So what should you do? So a child comes to you with some really horrific information. React responsibly. Remain calm, as hard as it is. I can imagine hearing something like sexual abuse or a child witnessing something that they shouldn't can be extremely alarming when you hear it, especially if you're not used to hearing that every single day like we do. But the biggest thing is to remain calm. If you express shock and panic, just think about how that might affect that child continuing to talk about that. So control your feelings. You can avoid frightening the child and causing guilt or embarrassment. Be warm and caring. Do not express anger or blame. Keep yourself from saying things like, why didn't you tell me? Why are you just now telling someone? Reassure the child. Tell them that they did the right thing. You're glad that they told. It's part of your job to help protect them, and assure them that it's not their fault and that they are not bad. I think the biggest thing you're going to hear from everybody that talks today on our multidisciplinary team is be extremely careful. Don't ask leading questions, just listen. Do way more listening than talking. And as Michelle has already mentioned, just keep information confidential. That's extremely, extremely important as well. So If you ever have a question, that you want to run by, I know DHR is open to it, I'm open to it, you have something that you want to run by us, and you probably need to make a report, we're always available for you to give us a quick call and just talk things through with you. A suspicion is enough to make a report of abuse. Remember, you don't have to have proof. You only need a reasonable suspicion. If it's a good faith report, you are protected by law. So don't forget that. And I know it's really difficult. You have these families that really trust you as the teacher. You have mixed feelings about making a report, but making a report of abuse is extremely important if you have the suspicion. Remember, you're not making an accusation against someone. You are requesting professional help for that family and that child. You could very well be the only person at this time to speak up for that child. So I just encourage you to remember that. And Marilyn Colson is going to now come up and talk to you more about mandatory reporting and making that report.
Good afternoon. I am Marilyn Colson. I'm the director of the Chilton County Department of Human Resources, and I'm going to focus on mandatory reporting, which of course all of the employees of the school system are mandatory reporters, and also the role of DHR in receiving those reports and what we do when we receive them. So first of all, the slide that you should be looking at now is who are mandatory reporters. And of course, all employees of public education, K through 12, are mandatory reporters, and that includes teachers' assistants, bus drivers, lunchroom personnel. And what we know at DHR is that you all know these kids. You see them every day. You know their patterns, you know what's usual, what's not unusual, and you know them, and we don't. When we receive a report from you, we're going to go out to the home unannounced if it's abuse or neglect that may be occurring in the home. We're going to go out to that home. We're going to speak to every child in the home. We're going to interview every child in the home alone, away from the parents or whoever may be the perpetrator of the abuse, the alleged perpetrator of the abuse. And then we're going to, see the home. We're going to assess the home for safety. We're also going to talk to collaterals. If the education system did not make the report, we're probably going to be talking to you as teachers. But with all of that, the child still may not disclose. We may not know what is going on. You do, but we haven't gotten reasonable evidence to support intervening. And of course, the parent-child relationship is still considered almost holy in it is. It's a very special relationship, and we just cannot go intervening in situations where there's not abuse and neglect. So what I'm trying to tell you is you may report a situation and you may just know because you know them. We have to find reasonable evidence to support our intervention. And of course, we have to have generally the court's involvement to intervene in a dramatic way in those situations. So my message to you is you may report, you may feel like we haven't done anything, but we may have not been able to come to that reasonable evidence to intervene. So report again. And report again. And I know that's putting a lot on you, but sometimes that's what it takes. Because as Jana has already said, sometimes children don't disclose. They may be afraid to disclose. They may feel like that they would rather stay in the situation than risk losing everything that's familiar to them. And so sometimes it takes more than once to get to the truth. You can see on that chart that all the other mandatory reporters, medical personnel, hospital employees, daycare workers, and of course another one that people ask about sometimes is just that clergy are also mandatory reporters. So sometimes children will share things at church with their minister that they may not tell other folks, and they are mandatory reporters, and there is a definition of that in the law. And that's the other thing I want to focus on. As you'll see at the top of that slide, this is in the Alabama Code. I know at our office we talk a lot about, well, now what's policy and what's law? But this is not just a policy of the Board of Education that you are mandatory reporters. It is the law. And if you go to the next slide, other people can also report. But as teachers, that is your legal obligation. However, you are not liable for reporting because you are a mandatory reporter. We do not tell families or parents who the reporter is. Now, in the situation of schools, a lot of times they can figure it out. We also have situations where families will think of, well, it had to be this one, or this one. So if I say I know they told you, DHR told me who did it, I may be able to, make that case. But we never tell. We never confirm that, even if it is the school. And of course, again, you are protected liability-wise in terms of reporting. So what must you report? So known or suspected neglect, or known or suspected abuse. And on the slide that you are looking at now, it defines suspected neglect as the negligent or maltreatment of a child, including failure to provide adequate food, medical treatment, supervision, clothing, or shelter. Or known or suspected abuse, the harm or threatened harm to a child's health or welfare. I will tell you that in Chilton County, and probably in most counties of the state, that the number one problem we deal with in terms of children being safe in their home is the use of drugs, primarily methamphetamines. I mean, our position is that if a parent is on methamphetamines in the home, that child is by definition not safe. And you're not going to see the parent using drugs, but as Jana also pointed out, you're going to see a pattern of other behaviors with that child. They may be frequently absent from school. When they're at school, they may not be able to stay awake because their parents may have kept them awake all night. They may not come to school because the parents are sleeping and didn't or are out from drug use and don't get them up to get on the bus or to get them to school. They may not be clean. They may be hungry. I know it's a wonderful thing that at least we know when children are in school they're getting food on a regular basis. But those will be some of the signs that you may see. Or you may have a child tell you that their parent is using drugs. The children are usually very aware of what's going on. We've even had a child who has told us where she was going, where her parent received drugs and was able to actually name the drug users, the drug supplier. She knew their name. So what if you make a report and yes, we are able to have, it's reasonable evidence that something is going on, and we may not know immediately if the child is safe or not, but we may have some serious concerns. So what are we going to do? Well, if a child is at immediate risk of harm, we, along with law enforcement, can do a summary removal and remove them from that situation. Now, within 72 hours, there has to be a court hearing because parents have a right to have the reason that their child has been removed explained to them and to, submit evidence that that's not the case. But we can do that when there is immediate risk of harm, and generally in those situations, law enforcement is always going to be with us. However, what we first want to do is to be able to maintain families in their own home if that can be done safely. And we do have services that we can provide in terms of counseling, drug education, child care, daycare, a different range of services to try to keep children in their home if they are not at immediate risk of harm, or we can try to keep them with family members by using a safety plan where the family agrees to their being with a family member while we work with them. Sometimes there's not any appropriate family members because we do have to do criminal background checks and child abuse and neglect registry checks, and there may not be any other appropriate family to take the children in for a time. So in that case, we may have to place the children in foster care. So our agency is also responsible for the recruiting and licensing of foster homes. Foster homes can be a good substitute, but I can tell you this, that most children do want to be with their own families. Often, of course, one of the first things that we often do is refer to Butterfly Bridge for forensic interviews, and then following that for counseling and treatment. Particularly, well, it's usually with cases where there's been sexual trauma, sexual abuse, or serious physical injuries. So to make a report under the law, you are required to either report to DHR or to law enforcement. And if you report to us and it involves a situation that law enforcement needs to be involved in, well, then we contact them and they will partner with us in actually going out, or we will let them know about a situation so they can follow up. And of course, that's all connected to the criminal justice system, which of course CJ is going to talk with you about in a few minutes. So it's a partnership, but to meet the requirements of the law, you must report to DHR or law enforcement. If law enforcement gets a report, then they most typically will call us and we will go out with them, or if they've been involved in something that was, they will let us know. And on that, I do want to point out on that slide that we, of course, are in a new building, which we are thrilled about, that's across from the health department on Health Center Drive, and all of our phone numbers changed. So for months last year, we moved June 22nd. A lot of folks were still calling the old number, and they had trouble getting us. Then we had actually, it's a internet-based phone system, so there was problems with the system, and so it was just really a bad situation for a while. But that number is not our number that's listed there. Our number is 205-258, not 259, so make a note of that. And unfortunately, I always resisted this until it was nothing I could do about it. We now, you have selections that you have to make. And you just follow the selections to get to intake to make a report of child abuse and neglect. Our intake worker is Bethany Chancellor, and if many of you have made reports in the past, you probably have talked to Bethany. She's very experienced. She knows the questions to ask you. Basically, when you call, you just need to know the child's name. If you know their address or you know where they live, we do need to know that. Of course, sometimes we get reports and we don't even know that. They'll say, well, it's the house at the end of such and such street, on the right or the left, and we will go out based on that. But it is helpful to have that kind of information when you call. If Bethany is not available, our backup intake worker is Jennifer Headley Brewer, and she also is experienced. And then, of course, if neither one of them are available, any one of our social workers might take your report. In fact, sometimes I've even done that. So report immediately. And again, the law is that the person who knows it or who is told of the abuse or thinks the abuse is going on is the person who needs to report. Now, it's very helpful to us when you're in the school situation that if you know something, you feel like something's got to be reported, don't wait till 2:30 to call. Try to call as early in the morning as you can. It may not be possible for you to leave your classroom to call. In that case, it is acceptable to let the counselor call, but you may want to, you will want to later come back and sign the 1593 or send an email yourself, so you are protected under that law. Because I know you have a lot of responsibilities, and it's not like you can just make a phone call at the drop of a hat. And the next slide is what information must be reported, and it's basically what I've said. And again, do not think the intake worker is doubting anything that you're telling them when they ask question after question. It's just that they try to get as much information as possible to help us know what to look for when we get involved. Okay, and then the final slide is to access the mandated reporter training, and this is a requirement. Mr. Griffin just shared with me that he does continue to ask all of the employees to complete this mandatory child abuse training every year. It will be the same as it was last year, and I know you all have a way to confirm that you've done that, and you just go to that website, and I did it recently just to make sure everything was working right. You just follow the links and you will get to the training. And yours, the ones you would be looking for is for the child mandated training. Now, I know that there have been times in the past when you may have reported something and you did not feel like we handled it appropriately, and you know, you may be right. These are complicated situations. The cases that we are starting to deal with are so complicated and so many. In the last 5 days, we brought 10 children into care that are 7 of which were under the age of 5. And you know, they weren't in school last year for someone to report that there were problems. So we do make mistakes sometimes. A lot of our workers, we are now dealing with in Chilton County the same thing many counties have dealt with for years, and that's a large staff turnover. To be honest, the job is so complicated and so hard and so demanding and stressful that a lot of the workers are not staying. They're moving on to other jobs that don't require that kind of commitment. So in addition to increasing number of cases and increasing work demands, we have newer workers. And they often don't know the policy as well as someone who has been doing it for several years. So what I want to say to you, as you come across situations where you have a concern that we did not respond appropriately in your opinion, or if you think that we missed something, or if there's any kind of problem with any employee, call me, because I will be happy to talk to you. And it's not getting anyone in trouble, because that's not the way I manage. It's a matter of let's solve the problem, let's find out what's the cause of the problem. Sometimes it's a system problem. Nobody's getting in trouble for that unless it's a gross episode of not doing your job. And if it is, I really need to know those. So please call me, and my direct number is 205-258-4915. 205-258-4915. And the final thing, having this many people I'm talking to, I cannot not take the opportunity to let you know that we need foster homes. We have a lot of foster homes. Last year, I think we did 17 foster parent adoptions, which is wonderful. Those are situations where the families were never able to get their situation to where they could safely parent their own children, but other people in this county stepped up. They were foster parents and they became adoptive parents. But we need foster parents and adoptive parents. But as I said, we've had 10 children since last Thursday. So if you are interested in fostering, or if you know anyone in your family or your church, please get in touch with us. You can call me, the 205-258-4915, and we will get that, take action on your interest. My dream is for us to have enough foster homes that they're in enough places in the county that all children can stay in their own school when they come into care, that we can match foster homes with the child. Because you know, some children do well in one kind of home, but they may not do well in another. So we would like to be able to match them. So keep that in mind, and any problems, any questions, if you ever want us to come to your school, we'll be glad to have a one-on-one question and answer whatever. So just let me know, and thank you so much. And thank you for partnering with us through the years. I know for a fact of many children who are safe today because of your involvement in what was going on with them. So thank you for that.
Good afternoon. My name is C.J. Robinson. I'm the Chief Deputy District Attorney with the DA's office. We cover Chilton, Watauga, and Elmore counties. And I'm going to cover a few things now, and then I'll turn it over to Investigator Hurst, and then I'll come back up here in a few minutes and kind of cover a few more things. But the first thing I want to cover is with regards to, I don't want to get involved, but I'll tell someone. So with regards to what to tell, what not to tell, you've heard some of that stuff, but the question is, should I tell? Well, in Alabama, the law technically says if you discover facts or circumstances that lead you to believe you have a good faith belief, and that the key there is good faith belief, that someone under the age of 16 has been the victim of abuse, you have a legal duty to report that abuse to law enforcement or DHR, or both. Just report it. You know, even if you're not sure who to report it to, just report it. The key there is good faith belief, and that's kind of going to come up in the next slide or two, and we'll kind of circle back to that. Mainly in the educational setting, I just want to reiterate to you that you can't satisfy that legal duty. Like, you can't complete it by just kind of sending a note to the principal, to the vice principal, to the counselor, or the school nurse. If the disclosure was made to you, if the child said something to you, that is your duty. Now, I think it's probably a good idea, and I won't speak as to the internal policies and procedures of the Board of Education, but from my standpoint, I don't see anything wrong if the disclosure is made to you and you decide to go to the counselor's office or go to the principal's office. I don't think that's a problem at all. But what's not okay is to send a note or to send an email that, hey, child X over here told me this, and you hit send, and that's the end of it, and you think that your duty's satisfied. Well, I did my part, I pushed the information on, I'm done. That's not how the law works. The duty is yours. Nobody can satisfy that duty except you. If you tell the administrator says, you've done everything you need to do, go back, we'll handle it. Well, that may work on an policy and procedure end, but from the legal end, it is still your duty. So you need to make sure that information gets where it needs to go. If you submit that to a principal doesn't submit that where it's going to go, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I kind of threw our tech guys over here a curveball. In the presentation we were talking about, there's a case we've dealt with recently that came up, and hopefully we can get that sorted out. So if not, I can just talk about it, but I threw them a curveball a few minutes ago. The next thing is, don't wait. Report immediately. I cannot stress to you how important this is. Do not wait, report it immediately. And I'm sure Jana, I'm sure Rodney would come up here and say these same things to you, but please listen when I say this. It is our job to talk to these children. Now, I think there's a special calling for people to be able to do this, because this is not the kind of stuff that you want to go to dinner parties or social receptions and talk to people that do not work in this field and talk about the things that we have to sit down and talk to these children about. If you can imagine going back in time and thinking about your first ever sexual experience. I don't know the age of that. Don't want to know the age of that. I'm not trying to get into that. I want you to think about that, okay? So please don't start talking right now, anybody. But I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about, now you have to sit in a room full of strangers in a courtroom, and you have to talk about that. Now I want you to think, if that first experience you had was when you were a child, and that was an instance of abuse by someone that you loved and that you trusted, and that's what you had to sit in a room and talk about. So these things that we are discussing today, yes, they're important, and I know we need policies and procedures and legal stuff, but these are real people. These are real problems, and these are stuff that doesn't just happen. I mean, a lot of times this behavior starts and it gets worse over time. So don't wait, because if you see a red flag, it's usually not going to go the other direction. It's typically only going to progress forward. So, and when I say let us do our job, okay, we can't do our job without you, so help us do that. But once you get us involved, we've been through training classes. We have been through the fire, to put it a different way, in court, in hearings, in depositions, and all kind of stuff. We know how to ask questions. We know when to stop asking questions, how to go a different direction. So we have that training. But we've got to have your help, because these kids are probably going to trust you before anybody else to start telling you stuff. As far as teachers and counselors and whoever it may be that they interact with, that's going to be who they trust. So when you get involved, okay, when those flags come up and you get that information and you pass it on, that's great. If you take it upon yourself to be their friend, or to be the mama they never had, or to be cool big sister, and you're going to get to the bottom of it, okay? I can't speak to your administrative policies on that. Let me tell you what's going to happen, okay? So let's say Teacher Smith over here gets some information that she has a good faith belief this child was abused. She passes that information along. She gets the information where it needs to go. It goes to law enforcement. It goes to DHR. And at that point in time, a case is initiated. There's an investigation. At some point in that chain, somebody's probably going to reach out to you, Miss Smith, and just talk to you very generally in a relaxed setting about how did you get this information? How long have you known this kid? Do they make up crazy stories? They may get questions like that. If you take it upon yourself to be the private detective and do this whole investigation, let me tell you what's about to happen. Then, yes, you're in it, and you're not coming out of it, because you're going to be subpoenaed to come to court. You're going to be subpoenaed to come to grand jury. You're going to be subpoenaed to come to court after the case gets indicted. I'll show you a chart about that in a few minutes. And then you're going to be subpoenaed when we get to trial. When you get subpoenaed to come testify, you are subject to cross-examination. And it's not like you see on TV. It's not. It's much worse. I've testified multiple times. I like asking the questions as an attorney much more than somebody asking me the questions. Because all of us that live in this world, we know what it's like. We take the stand, and you know what? If there's something bad about you on social media, guess what? It's coming in. Yeah, that Facebook post you shared during the pandemic when you were at home, eating chips that you think anybody saw, is coming up in court. And it's going to be on a 12 by 12 screen, and you're going to be asked, oh, is this how you really feel about fill in the blank? And then they're going to go to your divorce paperwork, because that's a public record. And maybe you filed for divorce in Macon County because you didn't want anybody in Chilton County to know the problems that actually led to the divorce. But that's a public document. And the transcript in that hearing is a public document. So then when you testify, if it's a good defense attorney, they're going to go get that transcript, and then they're going to ask you, well, you weren't really truthful in your divorce pleading because it came out in that you were really having an affair with this person. Or you squandered some assets and you didn't disclose that here. So if you lied in that case, how do I know you're telling the truth here? Oh, you had an affair with this person in your marriage. Are you seeing the parent to this child? What's your motive for lying? And it can be a complete fabrication. But you have decided to interject yourself in the investigation. And so now this is what's going to come as part of that. I don't wish that on you. I don't wish that on anyone. But I'm simply telling you, those of us that have a career to where we deal with that, we're used to it. Let us do our jobs. Okay, let us help you to not be in that witness seat dealing with all of that. The next part would be mandatory reporting. Is there a penalty if I don't report? Well, yes, actually there is. If you do not report the information that you have. So if you knowingly fail to make a report. Now, I don't want to make this sound like we're out like the boogeyman to just get people, because we're not. But if you knowingly withhold information, because you know what? I went to church with their daddy. I'm not getting involved in that. Nope. Just gonna act like I didn't hear it. Well, there's a problem, because the law was passed with the intent to protect children. So now if you knowingly subvert the law that was passed to protect children, and a child is being harmed because you are knowingly not acting, then yes, you could be charged. It is a crime, it's a misdemeanor, And you could actually go to jail for up to 6 months and be fined $500, which the $500 is probably the least of your worries. Most people are actually more worried about going to jail for a period of time. Now, I don't like prosecuting teachers. I don't have a problem doing it either, or educators, principals, whatever it may be. In 15 years, I think I've counted 13 people that work in the education system that I've prosecuted. I think I've prosecuted 11 police officers. So it's our job that there is a line here. Once we communicate to you what that line is and where it is, if you decide to cross it, it is our job to enforce the law. So we don't just look for people to charge, but if you do it, that is our job. The next one says, mandatory reporting, can I get sued if I file a report? Well, here's the good news. Any person who suspects child abuse or neglect, you're presumed to be acting in good faith, and you are immune from any legal action that may be taken against you. So what this says is you literally have nothing in the world to lose if you report suspected child neglect or abuse, as long as you're acting in good faith. Now, I've come to see over the years that sometimes that's the key part there about good faith. So if you see something or you hear something like we've heard today, a behavior, acting out, especially with the smaller children, if they say, mama's new boyfriend JoJo does whatever and says this, and that red flag to you kicks off like, oh, that worries me, then push the information on. Let somebody know. Please, as long as you're acting in good faith, you're fine. Now, if your best friend has a new boyfriend and they're in this nasty divorce, nasty custody battle, and you decide to just make up something, then yeah, you're probably going to get sued about that. But I'm hoping we have good, moral people. You typically wouldn't be in this job because you're not going to make $250,000 a year. So you're in this job because you want to help people and you want to give back to your community. And that's the kind of person who's not going to call and make up some stupid report to try to help somebody in a custody case. So I don't think we have to worry about that. I tell you what, before Rodney comes up, do y'all have that video available? Before you play it, let me tell you, I've asked him to play a quick video for you. It's 25 seconds and it's 9 seconds. There's no sound, but let me set the stage for you. So when we talked about knowingly file a report, okay, this is a real case. I was not going to talk about this. I'm going off script. Hope I don't say this too long, but I think this is something you need to know. So this is a case that happened in our circuit. This is a case I prosecuted. This is a case where the offender that you're going to see, this was admitted in trial, so this is public record, where the person who committed this crime, he sexually assaulted a female in the bathroom of a school. He committed that crime. He was caught. She fought back and he didn't get to complete that crime. When that information went to the administration didn't really think it was a big deal. It never got reported, okay? It finally got reported months later. But it did not get reported. Remember I said report immediately? It did not, okay? And it was so delayed in getting reported, he withdrew from that school and he enrolled at another school in the county, okay? Another school in the county. And guess what he did, okay? He sexually assaulted another girl in the bathroom, okay? So we had to look at that case and decide whether or not we should prosecute the whole administration of the first school. Well, it looks like it was a situation of really bad policies and procedures to where it was probably a good basis for a lawsuit. I'm not in the civil world, but it didn't quite rise to the level of knowingly. But I hope that everybody involved in that case for the rest of their life has to look in the mirror and ask themselves, maybe if I had been paying attention, if I had taken it seriously, if I had listened when people said this, could I have prevented this next act from happening? That is my plea to y'all today. When you see something, if you act, okay? If you act. Maybe you said something before we can build a case. But maybe by you saying something, you can help us get involved and you can run off Nasty Harry over here, or whatever his name is, before he actually abuses the child. So if y'all could play that, this would be a good time. So I think the 25-second clip would be first. So what he's pulling up here, and Nick, if I need to stop, just tell me I'll quit talking. But what he's pulling up here, there was an after-school program, and the girl, she'd had some surgery from a incident playing sports, so she's making up some tests. And this young man, he was there, he was also in the school, he had scoped her out, he was walking around the school waiting on her to leave. When she walks out of the school, he walks out behind her and says, "Hey, teacher so-and-so over here in this classroom said you forgot to put your name on the test." So she's walking back toward that area to try to see that teacher. And that's kind of where this happens here. So they're walking through the hall, and if you can see the screen here, shortly he is going to shove her into the bathroom. Now the second clip is going to be after about 2 minutes where she was being sexually assaulted in that bathroom, is going to be what happens when she fought her way out of that situation. And you see he turns and goes the other way. I know I just showed you 2 clips of what was a big case, but my point is, if that information had been reported by the first school, by the teacher, by the administration, by the counselor, he would have never been able to enroll in another school in that county, and what you just saw would have never happened, okay? Now, that is my plea to you. I've went way over my allotment of time for this portion. I'm gonna turn it over to Investigator Hurst, but in light of what we heard this morning or this afternoon and some of these other stuff, I thought that was really important for you to see. We're not just making this stuff up, guys. This is real. This is 100% real, and we need your help.
Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Rodney Hurst with Chilton County Sheriff's Department. I'm a member of the Special Operations Unit. We investigate anything from crimes committed against children to murder. I'd rather be speaking to 500 of y'all sitting out in the open room and looking to this camera. This is the first time for me doing this, so here we go. I think the first thing on my slide was hesitation. After CJ's kind of intense speech, now we see where hesitation comes from. But he gave you an out for that. The hesitation, there's no reason for it because you can't get sued for doing your job. You can't get sued for telling what a child has told you. That's the good faith. As police officers, we operate on that same mentality, that same guideline. Unfortunately, we still get sued for even acting in good faith. We still have a problem with that, but that's a whole other story. So the reason for the hesitation is you may not want to get involved. It's scary. As CJ said earlier, Janet said earlier, Miss Marilyn said, we deal with this every single day. Not once a month, not twice a month, not every single day. There's an investigation either with one of the 5 municipalities in this county or the Sheriff's Department. You're the champions for the children. You're first line defense for those children. Many of those children have parents who could care less what that child does when they leave that home or even when they're at the home. When they get to you, you're the first person that gets the chance to listen to them, hear what they've got to say, and take those little pieces. As human beings, we all want to solve the problem. That's what, as an investigator, I want to solve the problem. And even as investigators, too many times we jump forward 10 steps instead of backing up 1 step and do what's already been reiterated to you multiple times a day, is just listen. See what that child has to say. Proven fact that people with secrets, whether it's a bad secret or a good secret, those people give little bitty pieces of those secrets at a time. They do that to elicit trust. Can I trust the person that I'm speaking to? They didn't even go for criminals. When we're interviewing a criminal, they'll do the same thing with us. They'll give us little pieces at a time just to see, are you listening? What are you going to do what I'm going to give you? A child does that same exact thing. They've been hurt by someone, so they don't know who they can trust. So it could be for example,
John touched my ear this morning. That could mean nothing, absolutely nothing. But if it's something, a phrase like that comes out, and you hear that, is that something normal for that child to say? Do they say that every day, or is that the first time you've heard it? If it's the first time you've heard it, go with it a little bit, or listen the next time that child makes another statement, because you're going to be getting little pieces of their story that if you don't catch on in the first couple, you may be the last person to ever hear that story. It may never be told again. As an investigator, we don't question children. That's left up to Butterfly Bridge and the professionals there. They're highly trained to do that job. So when you start getting these little pieces of information, once you figure, okay, this is bigger than a little bitty piece, listen to what they got to say. Don't, as you were told earlier, don't ask leading questions. Just listen. I don't know what your policies are on recording conversations. In the state of Alabama, as long as one person knows they're being recorded, and that's a recording party, that's a legal recording. I don't know what the school's policy on that is, so that you're going to have to ask your administration. But if you can record a conversation, record it. Doesn't matter if the child knows or not. They don't have to know. If they want to know, that's fine. That's kind of beside the point. That statement can never be made again. It can be duplicated, but not exactly. Some wording is going to change. So if you can record a conversation that a student makes about child abuse or any type of crime you think may be committed, try to record it if that's allowable. As far as different types of things, if a child is telling you that something's been done to them, that's a crime against that child. In other words, you're able to talk to that child without an issue. Just try not to lead them along through the conversation. Let them tell the conversation. So let's go to a child who you believe has committed a crime inside the school or anywhere. Doesn't matter on school grounds or not. But let's say it is on school grounds. You're wanting to find out, okay, why did you do it? When did you do it? How did you do it? There's something you got to remember when you go to talking to that child about that crime, no matter the age of the child. If you feel a crime's been committed and you go to asking questions, what did you do? Once you've done that, your Miranda is which is your read your rights. Everybody watch TV, everybody sees Law and Order, whatever program they watch. Miranda is given to anyone and can be given by anyone. In other words, as a law enforcement, I'm not the only person who Mirandizes. If you're a teacher and you're suspected of crime, you've got the criminal or the suspect there with you, and you go to ask them questions, two things has to happen for Miranda to be required. Number one is the person is a suspect. You believe they've done something wrong. So you're going to ask them questions. The other part of that is, are they free to leave? You don't have to have a set of handcuffs to establish that a person is not free to leave. You're a teacher. If that student leaves that school during school hours, they've done what? They left the school. They shouldn't have left the school. Now they're going to be suspended, whatever that penalty is. So that child knows that child's not free to leave. So when you go to asking those questions without Miranda, then that child is being illegally questioned. That's where we come into play at. If you believe a crime has been committed in school, you haven't had, most schools now we have SROs, but that SRO may be busy doing something else. If you believe a crime's been committed, number one, secure wherever you think the crime scene is. If it's drugs in a locker, there again, I'm not speaking to your policy, but if it's drugs in a locker and the drugs can be left in the locker, you believe drugs are in a locker, secure the locker, contact us. If you have drugs in a book bag, the book bag's in there in the office of you, that book bag's secure, or even a gun if that matter. If that book bag can be secured in that office, leave it there. Let law enforcement get there and let us deal with it that way. The last thing we want to do is prosecute children. That's not what we're here for. Unfortunately, it's a necessary evil. We prosecute children. In order for us to make a case of that, it's got to be a legal case. It can't be something that's been tainted prior to our arrival. Some teachers we've dealt with in the past, we get there and we've already been through all this. They've already been questioned, the drugs have been seized, and the question is, what is law enforcement going to do about this? We're going to seize the drugs. If that child is already admitted to all this stuff, we're not trying to go after that child in court anymore because of there's everything about the investigation has already kind of went to the wayside. So if it's something you want to do as a teacher, as a school, as an administration, and you go through that and you confiscate the drugs, and at the end of the day, all you're looking for is a child to be suspended, that's fully up to the school. But if it's criminal prosecution, we have laws and guidelines we have to go by in order to make that case stick in court later down the road. So we spoke about hesitation. We spoke about interviews and word interrogation, what we're doing with our children. Everything you do, try to do in writing. If you're talking to a child, if you feel evidence being given to you of abuse, try to document. If you can't record it, even if you can record it, write it down. Write down as much as you can about everything you hear. Evidence inside the school, photograph anything you can at that time, not 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, photograph it in real time. A child that comes in with bruised on their arms, there again, I'm not, as far as your policy, but let's just say you have a child that comes in that has bruised on the arms and it's on the inner arm and you can physically see 4 fingers on that arm. Photograph that. Because the problem is a child heals extremely fast. If you get a report on Monday and that child comes in and you see 4 fingerprints or 4 fingers on this child's arm and you don't photograph it on Monday, by the time we go through this lengthy process, we may not see that child again until Friday or Monday of the next week. By then, the bruising's gone. We have no more evidence. We have your word, but that's as far as it goes. Pictures in court say 1,000 words. Anything that you can photograph that's within your policy and guidelines, photograph it. It helps us tremendously. And let's see, what else we got? We're close? I think I'm close. There again, this was all new to me. I enjoyed being here. Miss Marilyn brought something up earlier about if you feel that law enforcement did not do their due diligence, if you feel that, hey, that officer could have done better, please let us know. Let the sheriff know, the chief deputy know, let me know, let somebody know that law enforcement, you feel, hey, this could have been done better, let us know. We want you to reach out to us anytime, all the time. Because there again, you're the first people that gets to see and hear what happens. We welcome your phone calls at any time. And if we feel like, hey, they could have done better, we want that phone call also. Because there again, children are our #1 priority. We want them taken care of as best they can. And I think we're going back to CJ. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. You gave me time to calm down. I appreciate that. This next part will go much quicker than the last part, hopefully. But what I wanted to put up for you guys, it's actually a chart. And it's a chart I made, and it's just going to very quickly take you through kind of the criminal process of what to expect. If you look at your screen, just about, well, every single felony case, and if you're talking about child abuse, they all start the same way. So if you look at that chart up at the top, you see where it says police report. And that may be a police report. If you've submitted that to DHR, it may be their documentation, but for all intents and purposes, a report is what kickstarts everything. And that's like the kickoff to start the game. Well, once you get that report, there's got to be an investigation. So as the investigation proceeds, you may have medical records, you may have doctors look at that kid, you may have forensic interviews with Butterfly Bridge. There may be a ton of things that happen in that investigation phase. If a felony has been alleged, every case, if you look down the middle, it's going to end up in grand jury. Now, just because everything ends in grand jury, it could get there different routes. Now, if you look at your screen, you see one side that says arrest. Let's talk about that first. That's the most common way a case gets to grand jury. By the way, this is a good time for you to listen to this information in the event you are the subject of an investigation. If there's an allegation that you as an employee of the Board of Education committed a crime, this would be the same process that applies to you as well. So as you're looking at this chart here, you've got the report, the investigation. If you are arrested, that means there was probable cause to arrest you. Now, You got the arrest, within 30 days you have a preliminary hearing. If you see that chart there, that's before you get to the grand jury. So on the preliminary hearing aspect, the state of Alabama, we have the burden to put forth some evidence in front of, here it would be Judge Speaks, to show that you probably committed this crime. So that's that side of it. Now let's move up. After the preliminary hearing, the next step would be to go to a grand jury. Well, let's very quickly move to the other side of that chart where you see it direct present. Very few cases follow this route to get to the grand jury. However, the most common cases that follow this route are he said, she said cases where there is no forensic evidence, there is no confession, it is pretty much a he said, she said. Maybe the abuse happened 3 or 4 years ago, and so it's going to come down to who does the grand jury believe. Now, if we have a video and physical evidence, you're probably going to be on the arrest side. If you're talking he said, she said, it's more than likely going to be on the direct present side. Now you see death investigations over there. I mean, all kind of stuff goes to grand jury without somebody being arrested. You know, we have a lot of interstate here in our circuit. Think about all the time 65 is shut down. I know it happens a lot, right? Well, if someone dies in one of those accidents where there's an autopsy, that case has to go to grand jury. So there doesn't have to be an arrest for a grand jury to hear a case is my only point. So if you, looking back at the chart there, once you go whichever way to get to the grand jury, once you get back to the grand jury is 18 people in the community. They could be doctors, lawyers, teachers, housewives, truck drivers, doesn't matter. I don't get to pick them. They randomly get drawn out of a hat from the people who show up for jury service. They hear the case and their standard is probable cause. The exact same standard that Rodney has to determine whether or not he makes an arrest, the exact same standard that Judge Speaks would have to determine whether or not that there was sufficient evidence to arrest you. That's the same standard the grand jury has. Now, if the grand jury decides to indict the case, if you look at under the orange box now, then it's called a true bill. If 12 out of 18 people hear the case and say this is the kind of case that we want to go forward in Chilton County, then they issue a true bill. It does not have to be unanimous. A trial by jury, guilty or not guilty, it's got to be unanimous. In a grand jury, 12 out of 18 have to vote to indict. So if they indict the case, you see over down here, I'll cover this very quickly. Arraignment is where any document we're going to use to prosecute you or the offender of abuse, we have to give to the defense. Plea day, we argue, you know, with 50 attorneys. We're offering 15 years, they want 10 years. We argue for 8 hours that day with 50 people to fall somewhere between those two. You can ask Malia if she wants anything, just ask me after a plea day. I just say yes, I've argued all day. I don't want to argue anymore. So, sorry, I went off script again. But then after plea day, you move down to the trial week, where that's what you think of. We have the trial there. And then after trial, we have sentencing. So if you look at the other side of that chart, all right, if let's say we have 18 people on the grand jury, there's a COVID outbreak. We go from 18 down to 13. So there's 13 people on the grand jury. I've got to have 12 people vote to indict a case, to true bill it. If 2 people out of 13 say, I'm not sure they did it, then the case is no bill. Anything less than 12 people that don't think the crime happened is called a no bill. And if you look there, if you're ever the subject of investigation, that's going to be probably the best words you'll hear, meaning the grand jury did not indict the case. Now, a lot of people have asked this question, so I've updated the slide from last year to put this chart on the bottom corner down here to let you know if a case is no bill, we will not represent a case to a subsequent grand jury unless new evidence comes into our possession that we think, quote, could reasonably have changed the previous grand jury's decision. So if that grand jury met and there were 18 people and 11 people wanted to indict the case and we fell short of 1 vote, that's not going to take a lot of evidence. But if 18 people heard the case and the vote was 0 to 18, so nobody thought a crime occurred, it's going to take a lot of new evidence for us to go back and revisit that case. And a lot of times after this presentation, I've had some of you contact me and kind of ask for this chart. You're welcome to do that. I'm happy to send it to you, some of you civics and government classes if you would like that. Let's move forward, and I promise I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly. So the next slide you have should be talking about school and student-school employee relations. Before I talk about that, let me interject this. So there's a couple crimes that you may see in context of getting information. And of course, I mean, please report that. I mean, this should clearly be crimes, but if you have a situation where a child is telling you that they were involved in a sexual encounter and they're less than 12 years of age, okay, so if they're under 12, that's rape in the first degree, okay? Whether you're held down and forcibly raped or whether you're under the age of 12, that is the same crime, okay? It's punishable by 10 years up to 99 years in prison. So that's the most serious. And then you have sodomy in the first degree. Sodomy would be basically oral sex or anal sex, and the child's less than 12, or if it was forced. So you could be 16 years old and forced, like the video that you saw. Well, that'd be rape and sodomy in the first degree. Bumping it down in the second degree. I know there's a lot of confusion about what is first and what is second, and then school employee. And the reason is the legislature has put different ages on different stuff, and I know it can get confusing. So if you're just think about it though. If you're under 12, that's the most serious crime. Okay, you are clearly a child. Rape in the second degree is 2 to 20 years. If you're under the age of 16 in Alabama, you cannot consent to have sex. It doesn't matter if you're 15 and your boyfriend is 18, you cannot consent to have sex in Alabama. That is a crime. So employers, employees, administrators, if you have a student who is under the age of 16 and they are pregnant, a crime has occurred. There is one exception to where you have to get into counting the days between the difference in ages. Let law enforcement help with that. When you start having to look at birth certificates to see are they within this little exception that we carve out. Moving past that, and that sodomy second applies in the same thing. It's going to be oral or anal, and they're under the age of 16. So then you get into sex abuse. Well, that's like a touching type situation. It's a crime too. We move down to now the student school employee, which we've had a lot of in the last couple years. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of that in the last couple years. One quick thing I will tell you, in the world of digital evidence, there was a small window of time that Snapchat moved their servers to Canada, and we could not recover the videos and the images that were sent. We fixed that now, so anything that is sent, we now have full access to what you sent today, yesterday, and before. So it took the federal government a little while to fix that, but we now have access to that again. So those who were prosecuted when we couldn't have that, your case is done. We can't reopen that, but anybody that does that in the future, we now have access to that again. So that's just a side note there. So if you are a school employee, you cannot have sexual intercourse or sex or sodomy, that we just talked about earlier, with a student under the age of 19, okay? So, I know this may sound weird, but if you worked for the power company and there was somebody who was a junior in high school and they were 17 years old, the law doesn't make that a crime. If you are a volleyball coach and that student is 18 years old, you cannot have sex with that student. That is what Alabama law says. It is a crime. It doesn't matter if it was consensual. It can be consensual all day long. The law does not say that that's okay. It makes it a crime. If you commit that crime, the punishment's 2 to 20 years, and under the SORNA Act, you will be a registered sex offender the rest of your life. The next step would be the sexual contact law. So this is short of the actual sexual intercourse. This would be a touching, groping, feeling, whatever you want to, terminology you want to put there. I know Jana talked about those definitions earlier. Same deal here. Consent is not a defense. It doesn't matter if they wanted the welcome to the touching or not. It is not a defense. It is a Class C felony, a year and a day to 10 years, and you are a registered sex offender. All right, moving to the next slide. This is where a lot of the Snapchat and things come in. So if you have a school employee soliciting a sex act with a student under the age of 19, this could be soliciting, persuading, encouraging, harassing, enticing. It's kind of a catch-all that gets a lot of the crimes along with the next slide. I'm just going to cover those two kind of in conjunction with each other. Anything that's covered by this slide, the soliciting, and go ahead and you can put the next slide up there, that's more of your sexting law. It is a crime to try to get a student to send you naked pictures. It is a crime to send a student naked pictures. okay? Just don't do it. Please don't do it. Jan and I are going to speak to a school, not in this county, but in our circuit very soon, that had multiple instances of this in a very short period of time. And just don't do it. I don't know how else to say it, especially now that we have access to the images that you've sent again, that for a small period of time we didn't. You know, we're gonna find out, just don't do it. So I don't really want to cover specifically what's an obscene picture and what is not. If you're having to ask yourself, should I send this because it's an obscene picture, then just go ahead and classify that as an obscene picture. So, and if you get a picture from a student, okay, that could potentially be child porn. So nobody is going to prosecute you if you didn't solicit that picture and a student sent you a picture and said, hey, give me a call, okay? I would recommend to you taking that to your administrator and saying, hey, look, just letting you know, I didn't ask for this. I don't want to get in trouble. This is what's here. So what not to do is to respond to that. So just keep that in mind. The last slide I have, and then I will be done, is just 5 kind of things in summary here that you've heard from us today. 1, we need your help. We absolutely need your help. This law was passed to protect children. We can't do that without you. So help us help you. Almost every case involving a child is he said, she said. So, you know, we need you. We need you. You may be a witness to help protect this child and keep it from happening to somebody else. So help us with that. It's a long process. Very, very, very few cases are settled in less than a year. Sometimes it takes 2 years for a final resolution. This circuit is one of the few in the state. We are no longer backed up with grand jury cases going into COVID. Now, we presented 3,000 cases in 4 months to get caught up in this circuit that other places have not. But even once we get it indicted, we still backed up with jury trials. So it's not going to be resolved anytime soon. And since it's not going to be resolved soon, documentation, as they said, is 100% key. So you got to make notes. You got to keep it down, because 3 years later, when this gets to court, if you get called to come testify, or if you are involved in whatever way, and you don't document it, you're probably not going to remember the details. So if it's not documented, like I talk in the police academy when I teach them, if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So unfortunately, you're going to be accused of making a narrative that's better today than it was wherever you learned this information, and you're going to be accused of that because you didn't document it and write it down. Number 4, don't discuss the case. The more people you discuss the case with, the more people that you have now put on the witness list to testify. The more people that you tell, the more people they're going to tell. And then when they get called to the stand and asked about it, it's kind of like the Girl Scout game, to where what's the story at this end of the line? Is it different at the other end? And every time that changes, they're going to accuse you of being the one to corrupt that information. So just don't do it. It keeps your credibility intact, and it keeps you out of the middle of a bunch of just mess you don't want to be in. And number 5, finally, misinformation is rampant. It is so rampant in the world of social media, which is the devil. Everybody's got an opinion. Nobody knows any facts, but everybody's an expert. And I can't tell you how many times that according to social media, that I just made up charges on someone because fill in the blank. I mean, I don't know. My third cousin, twice removed, spilled tea on them at some restaurant or something. That's the crazy story you get. People don't know, okay? And when people don't know, they can't help themselves. They tend to have an opinion. So my point of that is, everybody's got a voice. They almost never know the facts. But if you, as a teacher or as an employee of that school, take it upon yourself to interject in this group text, or interject yourself on this Facebook post, or whatever it may be, then you have given instant credibility to whatever is being talked about, because, oh, well, they were talking about it and they didn't correct this or they did correct that. So just stay out of it. Just stay out of it. Like I showed you earlier with that video, these are real cases. And so even though we deal with this stuff a lot, we get somewhat detached from it. It's real feelings, it's real people, it's real emotions. Sometimes these people have real mental health issues they need to work through because of the crimes and abuse that occurred to them. And you know what? Sometimes there's mental health problems on the folks that commit the crimes. And I hope they get that help in prison one day when they're there for a long time. But we need to try to protect the children, okay? That is the crux of all of this. So the whole talk, there's We could go 100 different ways what we talked about today. The main point of this is protect children, and that's what we need your help to do. So thank you for your time, and if you have questions, please call us at the DA's office, 4242, 755-4242, and we'll help you any way we can. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Holly Elkins. I'm an outpatient therapist with Central Alabama Wellness, and I'm going to be your incoming Clanton office coordinator starting next week. So I'm really excited to get a little more immersed in your community, learn a little bit more about some things you guys have going on here. But today I'm just here to talk to you briefly about mental health in schools and some resources that our agency can help provide for you guys to support your students. So before I was working in the outpatient office up in Pelham, I spent 4 years as a school-based therapist with our agency and got to really see what you guys do every single day, from changing hats, whether you're an administrator, a teacher, the custodian, and becoming school mama, sometimes being the probation officer, sometimes being the social worker, and really trying to help not just educate your students, but help raise them to be really productive members of society, well-balanced, well-supported students in your communities. So we're going to talk a little bit about some current trends that are going on in mental health in schools now, some resources that we can help provide you with, and things to look for in your students. So about 1 in 5 students are going to seek some kind of mental health intervention at some point in their adolescence, so sometime before they graduate your schools. And we've got classrooms of 20, 25 kids. That's several of your students already that are coming to you looking for that help, or coming to outpatient services looking for that help. Those are the top two locations that a student is gonna go to. Like it's been brought up before, you guys are the front line. Kids feel most comfortable with people that they know, and they know you guys the best. Now, what we're also seeing as far as current trends in mental health go is we're not seeing as much of externalized behaviors that people go seeking help for. So things like active defiance, violence with peers. We know it's still happening, not going to discount that, but we do see more people coming in for things like depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking, more of those internalized concerns. Now, what we also know is that when these mental health conditions are not addressed, we're seeing a lot more impact long term. So things like school disengagement, higher truancy levels, higher dropout rates, lower test scores, and we're also seeing more extreme behaviors, more extreme mental health conditions later on in their life. So what are some general things that you guys can look for? So I'll briefly run through these because then we're starting to run low on time, but changes in behavior, increased anger, increased irritability, more fighting among peers, big declines in grades, knowing that there's a trauma or there's been a major loss, suicidal jokes, suicidal gestures, even those flippant statements in the classroom. It's okay to push for a little bit more information. Any of these things could be a big indicator that there's depression, there's some significant impact to mood, there's anxiety. ADHD even has this huge link to anxiety, and I know you guys see this in some of the students that you're working with. So what can we offer you guys for support? So for children and adolescents, we offer mental health interventions through our outpatient office. For adolescents, we also offer substance abuse. So in the outpatient services realm, we're talking individual therapy, family therapy. There are some group options as well. Crisis intervention, if there's a very immediate mental health situation happening. We can also link them to psychiatric care. Our agency is therapy-based. We don't sit there and push medications on children. But if it is clinically relevant, it's indicated, then we can do referrals for doctors for that additional level of support. At the outpatient level, we can also do school-based services. Now, we're only offering those in Clanton for right now, but what that is a therapist who comes out to your classrooms, pulls kids from class, and provides that service in a setting they're already very comfortable in. That helps with reducing the number of checkouts, keeping parents at work, where we may depend on that hourly pay to be able to provide other needs in the home. Speaking of, we also offer in-home intervention in Chilton County, and this is a short-term intensive level of therapy where we have a therapist and a case manager who go out to the homes, go out in the community, come to the schools, and provide more frequent services to kids who are at that higher level need, who might be at risk for later removal from the home secondary to their behavior. We also offer just case management services at the outpatient level. So this is another provider within the agency who can again go out in the community, come to the schools, go to the home, link students and families with resources to help get food resources, clothes, transport to and from appointments. Out in rural communities, sometimes we're looking at some poverty issues, resource issues, and we want to help support students in accessing services that they need, regardless of whatever those roadblocks may be. So if you find students in your classroom that are coming to you with some of those warning signs that seem to need some resources, some extra mental health support, you can always get them connected to our resources online at centralalabamawellness.org. You'll see a tab at the top that says Access to Care. It's a brief online form you can fill out. School counselors are welcome to help connect parents and help type the information in with them. I know that sometimes internet connectivity is a big barrier to accessing services. They can also call online and just follow the prompts from that recording and get connected to Access to Care that way, and provide a brief bit of demographic information over the phone, and we'll call and get that appointment set up. If you guys have any questions or feel like you may have a student that's in need but you're not sure, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Holly Elkins. I can be reached at that same phone number from before. It's 205-651-0077, and I'd be happy to help answer any questions or talk you through that referral process or ways that we can give support to kids in our community. So thank you very much, and with that, I'll turn it over to our superintendent.
And so to summarize what we're doing today, it's all about protecting the children. This last part, I want to share something very exciting. We're very pleased to have great partnerships with all the entities that we've been working with for many years here, Central Alabama Wellness, the DA's office, DHR, Butterfly Bridge. As part of the ongoing health crisis, we are very well aware that there are serious mental health issues, wellness issues that are occurring not just with our students but also with our faculty and staff. And so we've been partnering with Central Alabama Wellness for several years now, and they do an excellent job and have worked with us tremendously through the years, and we're going to continue that partnership as well. In addition to that service, we also partnered with another group here recently, which is a local group, which is the Wellness Group, which many of you are familiar with, to provide free services to employees and to students. So I'm going to let them come up in a second, but I'll summarize it real quick. You should be, or if you have not already been contacted by the Wellness Group, you as an employee will have access to free mental health services. So whatever's going on in your life, whether it be professional-based, personal-based, it's really irrelevant to us. I want to provide the opportunity for you to get the mental health resources that you need. And so you'll be able to contact them directly, and they will provide those services at no cost to you. So we'll be providing that information as we move forward. In addition to that, in the same concept that we've been working with Central Alabama Wellness, we're also going to be working with the Wellness Group as well, so you can have a direct contact with them, so that those schools that we're not working with Central Alabama Wellness, there'll be a direct contact with the Wellness Group. So if you have a student and you identify an issue, you can report it to the counselor, and the counselor will then report it to the Wellness Group, and we will get them some immediate help, and they will determine what needs to be done from there. So I'm very excited about this partnership. This is something that has been a long time in coming to provide that for our employees, and thankfully we're able to do that now. So more information will be provided later, but I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Smith with the Wellness Group, and he'll share some details with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want y'all to know that I realize that we are last, and I realize that it is 2:48. So we'll make sure we hit the high points. But we're super excited about this program. As many of you already know, in the schools, mental health is a major issue within the school system that affects every part of it. I want to come here today and talk to you about the Wellness Group a little bit, who we are. We were established in 2008. Our sole purpose from day one was to meet the needs of the community. We feel like we've worked hard over the years to do this and developed community partnerships with many of the people in the agencies that you've talked with today. To just give you a little brief about us, we've been in the schools for the last 14 years. We've served every school in Chilton County. Most of you know us through the special education side of the house, where we may come in and address behaviors and things like that through the IEP, but this partnership we now have with the Board of Education is gonna open that up to everybody involved within the school system with access to free mental health care. And what that means is within our agency, we have 10 licensed professionals. We have 9 licensed counselors and 1 licensed social worker that goes into every school. We don't necessarily just send 1 licensed professional in one particular school. And the reason why we don't do that is because many of our licensed professionals are trained in different areas with different populations, and so we try to put the best counselor to meet the best need of that particular student or teacher or whatever. So you may see several of our counselors coming out of the school system, so that's the reason why we do it that way. The other thing about us is we are an agency that has 15 employees, 12 of which live and reside in Chilton County. Their kids attend Chilton County schools. Both of my children graduated from Chilton County schools, so this is not just a job for us, this is our community. This is important from a whole, and the mental health needs of our community are something that we've always tried to reach. So in this process, we want to work with you guys together on how we can do this. I'm going to turn it over just a minute to our newly established clinical director at the Wellness Group, Jared Hood. Many of you know him. He's going to tell you a little bit about how we can help in the services we provide. And then Christy Hagler-Hall, who is the supervisor of our school-based services, will kind of come in and tell you kind of what that looks like at the school level, how you can make the referrals, who you need to contact, and how we can get this services started within your school. So I'll turn it over to Jared Hood.
Hey guys, so like Jeremy said, we want to make it short and sweet for you guys because we know you want to go home. So think about the fact that it's being your job over the summer to prepare class, to take care of the needs of your students, all of those things. And we know that about you. You do the extra things, you go the extra mile for your students. It's what you do, it's what you're passionate about, it's the part that led you to go into teaching. So here's how we can come in and help with that. Those students who walk into your classroom who have all kinds of issues that have gone on at home, we in the past have always been able to come in and help through individual counseling and things like that, and we're still going to be able to do those kinds of things through Tier 3 type interventions that fall under special education, through their private insurance and things like that. But what this opportunity gives us is the chance to be a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 intervention for you guys as well. So it means that if you identify a need within your school, that we can come in and we can talk to and do an assembly school-wide for those kinds of things. If you've identified small groups of students and things who are dealing with a particular issue, we can come and do those things. And then on us being able to help you on a personal level, we can help out so that if you've got something going on, as Mr. Griffin said, in your life, no matter what that is, we know that it impacts your job, we know that it impacts you as an individual, and we want to help. So it's a chance for you to be able to call us up and say, hey, I've got something going on, I'd love to be able to come and sit down and talk to a counselor about those things. And now you can do that, and you can do that confidentially and get the help that you need without having to worry about a copay or a deductible or all of those things. It's such an incredible opportunity that we're so excited to be able to offer for you guys because we know the tough job that you do every day. And so to kind of connect that, lastly, but definitely not least, Christy Hall is going to come and talk to you guys about what that referral process looks like.
Hi everyone, I'm Christy Hagler, and I'm so excited to have this opportunity to be able to come with you for a few minutes today just to talk to you about this new program that is going to be introduced this school year. As Jeremy and Jared have both said, this program will be open to all students, not just if they have a IEP, but any student that is in Chilton County is open to teachers, counselors, lunchroom workers, bus drivers, anybody who has any connection to children within our school system. The job that you guys all do is so important, and just even the little things. I can remember back, and out of all of the teachers and all of the administrators that I had throughout my time at Maplesville High School, my kindergarten teacher is the one that sticks out in my head. You know, down to, I can tell you how the room was set up and some of the special things that she did for us, and where her treasure box was in her room. And so there's so many little details like that that is so important to all of your students. Y'all are some of the most positive people that they have and they get to see every day. Let's be honest, y'all spend the most time with our kids when school is in session during the school year. So this will be open up to all students, all teachers, like I said, anybody who works with the kids. So it will offer individual counseling for everyone, but it will also offer, we're going to be able to do small groups, classroom groups, and grade assemblies. So it may be where, as a teacher, that you identify you have 2 or 3 kids in your room that are dealing with an issue. You can call me and I can get a therapist set up to come in and work just with those students. It may be that you identify, hey, our 7th grade is really having a hard time just adjusting coming up to middle school, or, you know, maybe there's a lot of suicidal ideations that are being reported. We can come and present a program to them on self-harm and safety there. So this opens up just so many opportunities for our students on the individual level, small groups, classrooms, and grade assemblies. We will be able to help with topics such as anger management, social skills, bullying, self-care, healthy boundaries, grief and loss issues, internet safety, stress management. It can be related to your job or issues within the classroom or at school, or it may not be related to anything to do with work. It may be an issue at home, or just something in your personal life, because at the end of the day, our personal life, the things that are going on, can influence our professional lives as well. So we will be able, and that's just a few of the topics that we'll be able to help with and to work with. If there's anything that you have questions about, you'll absolutely be able to contact me and reach me with that. I'm going to tell y'all just the email address. If you have any questions, you can always email me, but you will be sent out a survey from Miss Michelle Coppage soon. She will be sending out just a short survey. If you will, please take the time to fill that out, and when you send it back, it'll come directly to me. It doesn't have your name or anything on it. It's just helping us identify some of the mental health issues that you see in your school. But that email address is wellnesschiltonschoolproject@gmail.com. You can also reach me by calling the wellness group. The number there is 280-7733, and my extension is 107. I'm looking forward to working with all of our school staff this school year, and hope everybody has a great one. Thanks.
Okay, my goal was to get you out by 3 o'clock, so I have 3 minutes. So to answer the questions about the health guidelines, stay tuned. We are working on that. I ask for grace and patience as we address that. You've seen the return to school plan that's on our system website. That is what we're implementing currently. Those things change almost, it seems like, daily now. And so we'll be making an announcement about any potential changes as we move forward. We have some information coming the end of the week from the State Department of Education, an on-call with the state health officer. So please, please show patience and grace and lots of prayers. These decisions are tough to be made, and we try to make them in the best interest of everybody involved. So And on that note, I'm going to close this in prayer, and it is 2:58, and you will be done by 3 o'clock. So let's pray. Dear God, thank you for this today. We just thank you for this school system. We just thank you for all that you represent to us in our lives. Pray that you'd be with us and help us and protect us and help us have a great school year. In Jesus' name, amen.